Okay, good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for joining us. Alex here from Festival of Enterprise, and I'd like to welcome you all for joining us today, whether you're here on the platform with us or whether you are joining us on Facebook Live, Twitter, or YouTube as well, where we are streaming today. So those of you who've peeled yourself off from the beach, maybe. Ben says it's scorching in the Midlands, sunny in Newcastle from Nichola. Nick's in North London, and I'm here in Poole in Dorset, where it is also scorching. Very nice in the sea, I have to say, having been in already today. So, thank you all for joining us. As I say, we are talking managing financial stability and staying on top of the latest government guidelines for employers. So this session is going to provide you with tangible measures and tips that small and medium businesses can use to manage their finances, as well as an overview, the latest guidance that we've got from the government affecting UK employers. So today I've got Nick Miller, who is the Managing Director at PayFit UK, and I've got Nichola Hailes, Payroll Legal Advisor at PayFit UK as well, who are going to run through all the recent changes impacting payroll and the different options available to employers to get support. We've also got time for Q&A. So as always, bit of housekeeping. Those of you already using the chat box, just pop that in there. You can see people piling in now, having got the notification that we're live. So come and join us, post up your name, where you're from. Normally situations like this would be networking at Olympia or the NEC. So, feel free to pop in your LinkedIn URL there in the box as well. I'm going to pop mine in there as well. Happy to connect with everybody offline, and I'm sure Nick and Nichola are going to pop up contact details as well for PayFit and how you can get in touch with them as well. So just going to focus the screen. Nick's going to start with a few words, and I'm going to hand over to Nick right now. Over to you, Nick.
Thank you very much. I'm Nick Miller. I'm the country manager, managing director for PayFit UK. Before PayFit, I ran my own business, a workforce management software called BuzzHire, which I ran for a few years. And before that, I worked for a company called Rocket Internet, which is a German company based out of Berlin, launching very fast-growing tech businesses all around the world. So I helped them launch what is now the largest fashion e-commerce platform in Southeast Asia, an e-commerce platform which is now the largest in Africa, and a food delivery business in the UK called Eat First. And before all of that, I worked at P&G, the big consumer goods company. So that's a little bit about myself, and over to you, Nichola.
Yeah, so hi everyone, I'm Nichola. I work at PayFit as a payroll expert and a product legal advisor. I've been with PayFit for just over 18 months now, but I've been working in payroll for around about 10 years. And the majority of that time spent working doing payroll in the financial services sector and the banking sector. And my role overall within PayFit is to make sure that customers, both internal amongst our PayFit teams and external for the customers that use our software, are always up to date with the latest HMRC and payroll guidance, and that our software is always fully compliant for users.
Great. So let me quickly introduce PayFit. PayFit was launched in 2015 in France to change the way small businesses run their payroll and HR processes. We're one of the fastest growing B2B softwares in Europe. We have over 4,000 customers to date in 5 countries. So originally launched in France, but then grew in Spain, Germany, the UK, and now Italy, with over 500 people working in the company. We work with lots of different businesses. As I said, we focus generally with SMEs, so 0 to 1,000 employee companies, and any sector. So we have companies like Revolut, Flux, Urban Massage, ULife, all leveraging our software here in the UK. And quickly, just to touch on what our software does. So for a lot of businesses, whether they've just launched or they've been scaling up for many years, payroll is a process which tends to be quite repetitive, quite manual, and hasn't very innovated very much. A lot of the time it's been outsourced to a payroll bureau, an accountant. And the idea of PayFit is to really streamline the payroll and HR process, automate it, make it a lot more transparent, so that founders, HR managers, finance managers, or payroll managers can seamlessly run their payroll, take a lot less time, it's a lot more enjoyable, and the experience for the entire team of employees at the company is a lot better. It's not just the software though, so we do automate the process and make it a lot easier, but we also provide a lot of support. We have payroll experts such as Nichola in the team, and a team of account managers that manage and help our clients navigate through the complexities of monthly payroll. And of course, everything is extremely secure, set up with the latest regulations. So that's a little bit about what we do. And today I'll talk about how to manage finances during this very uncertain economic climate. Feel free also to add in details in the chat around the kind of business or industry that you're in, the size, and I can provide a bit more specific tips and tricks over my experience over the last 7 or 8 years in managing businesses. We'll talk about the role of finance, extending your runway, and then Nichola will go into detail around the different types of support that there are for your business that you can leverage. So I think what everybody has experienced as a business owner or a finance manager or decision maker in the organization is that the key strategic focus, for at least for the next 12 months, has changed. A lot of companies, depending on the sector that you're in, but we're really focused on growth and accelerating the number of customers and the revenue that you had. And now, there's been a kind of drastic shift towards finance and becoming really very knowledgeable of the company's P&L. And so I think the key focus for any decision maker, founder, in a moment like now, is to really read up and go into the detail with the financial aspects of your business. So scrutinize your P&L and understand what is every line item that impacts your cost and your revenue. Be a lot more diligent when it comes up to tracking and reporting your costs, and implement much more regular budget reviews. So every penny counts. One of the key advantages for a company today is the bank balance that they have. That's going to be one of the competitive advantages that you'll have in your industry. And so preserving cash, generating more will be absolutely critical during this period. As I imagine most business owners, or depending on the area you're in, have worked on or assisted on, immediately it's very important to reforecast the plans for the year, to do it quickly, to prepare for the worst, to expect the worst. Doesn't make sense to be too optimistic and then constantly forecast down. Better to take quick action, try not to be too optimistic and really expect the worst, and then you can obviously react quickly to improvements in the economy. So one part is obviously putting together a new plan, understanding how the market has impacted your business, learning from the first few weeks of lockdown. Hopefully now there'll be a lot more data to be able to have a much more robust forecast, but then alignment within the team is critical, and to maintain clear communication on a regular basis can ensure that you navigate out of the situation in the best possible state. So assessing where you are in terms of your overall cost structure versus your plan, and really looking at that at least on a weekly basis, will help you to react quickly to the different challenges that come up, in a new kind of economy that we didn't expect. Obviously, it's a time to look at cost saving as a priority, as opposed to key big business investments that might generate ROI in 2 or 3 years. Now is the time to identify different opportunities in terms of automation or softwares that are out there that can enable you to reduce your operational costs, and focus the projects really on what's going to deliver improvements to your bottom line in the shortest space of time. And key is really to challenge previous assumptions. We're in a situation which no one could have predicted, and so what was true before doesn't necessarily need to be true anymore in terms of how you set up your costs. So whether that's the team organization, whether that's how you acquire customers, how you, what you spend in terms of rent, everything can be challenged now because we're living in a very different environment than before. So the key metric that every business owner will be looking at now very attentively should be their cash runway, which is the amount of cash that you have in the bank and the number of months it should last you before you run out. Depending on the different industry that you're in, this will vary. If you're a kind of high growth business that doesn't make a profit, maybe it's a tech business, it's been optimizing for growth, it's been raising external investment to fund that growth rather than revenue from clients. You want to be focusing on a runway ideally that gives you up to about 24 months. I, having been a founder and run a business of my own, 24 months I know is quite a luxury and can be difficult to obtain. But I think it starts with really being clear again on the data, understanding every week how the costs evolve and how that impacts your cash, and being able to track that properly. But then obviously looking at other ways to generate and extend this runway. So either you can raise new investment, which is something which is more difficult now than before, although the government is helping with the Future Fund and other activities. But also potentially it might be a time to look at loans and overdrafts. I tend not to want to look at those because obviously those are loans that need to be repaid. We know that the economy will bounce back from this. We don't know exactly when. So a loan could work, but it also puts a lot of risk on the business. Before going to that as the first avenue of improving the financial health of your business, I would look, at how can the business generate more revenue? What are the levers that you have today that can increase the amount of cash that you collect from customers? So is it your pricing? Is there an opportunity to upsell? Are there new revenue streams that you didn't expect or you didn't plan for, but actually because of the situation we're in, you could exploit? And really thinking outside the box on that, and looking at the data that you have can help to perhaps collect more cash than you currently are, or find new revenue streams. If finding new revenue streams isn't a possibility, then you need to become really quite detailed on how you look at the different costs that you have in the company. So when it comes to supplier agreements, is there an opportunity to renegotiate payment terms? Perhaps if you're paying 30 days or 7 days, can this be renegotiated to 60 days or 90 days with certain suppliers to give you a bit more breathing room? Rental contracts, do you need the same office that you had before? Is there an opportunity to cut costs there? This tends to be quite a large cost for a lot of companies. And any kind of external provider challenging whether they're necessary or not. If you're using freelancers, external consultants, accountants, is there an opportunity to do things in-house or in a more cost-efficient way? In terms of your overall expenses, I think starting from scratch again and really just looking at a blank piece of paper and saying, like, what's the absolute minimum that I require, and working from there is a healthier way to look at it rather than trying to cut down from your cost structure today. Your cost structure tends to build up over time, and things that you think are indispensable may not be anymore. And so starting with really a blank piece of paper and thinking, what do I need in terms of costs to operate this business, and testing different things. The economic situation is something that no one really expected. We don't know how long it will last. Clearly, obviously, things are improving every day, but flexibility will be a key strength of any business, and being able to test the costs that you have in the organization and what's really required is key, as well as testing different growth channels. So as I mentioned earlier, prioritizing shorter term projects that have a shorter return on investment. I don't think it makes sense for a lot of organizations to be focusing, unless they have a very healthy financial state, to be focusing on investments that will pay back over multiple years. At the moment, if preserving cash is one of the number one priorities for the company, then shorter ROI is preferable. And then testing sensitivity on the different acquisition channels. So if I spend a lot on marketing, what are the organic ways of finding customers? Which ones are the paid ones? And testing what would happen if I reduce my paid marketing spend by 50%. Do I see an equal return, an equal reduction in customers, or actually can I still retain a large percentage of my customer base or acquisition without spending as much money? So testing and being flexible and looking across the different ways that you acquire customers, what could be changed or what could be cut without impacting the business too much. A key part of the period that we're in is revenue collection is key as well. Part of preserving your cash is obviously ensuring that you collect as much of it as possible from the customers that you have. So really clearly having a strong process for tracking who's paying, for customers using the right tools to be able to pay you, and having a process to follow up with customers if there are, will be key over the next few months. And then obviously one of the big costs that most companies have is people. So understanding what's the right organization for your team for the future. May not be necessarily reducing the team, but maybe reorganizing it in a way that you could achieve more with the same amount of people is something that will be key in managing your financial health over the next few months. So yeah. If we go on to the next slide. Yeah, there we go. Just additional tips in terms of different things that businesses can do. Obviously, you can claim VAT on expenses. And what I've seen in the past is that some young companies in particular may not have the most robust process for managing their accounts. And just ensuring that you have the right tools to use to collect and understand exactly how much VAT you're paying, and so that when you claim your VAT every quarter, it's as accurate as possible, and you collect everything on which you've paid. If you invest in R&D, then tax credits can be a great way to help your financial stability. You need to apply for these every year. And if you've qualified, you can recoup a large amount of the cost that you spent on R&D. And then there are lots of offers out there, particularly in this period, for startups to receive services for free, such as cloud services like AWS or other tools and softwares that you can use to be more efficient, and get them at a discount, considering the situation we're in, at least for the next few months. So those are just some tips, those are just overall strategies that different businesses can take depending on the industry that they're in and the size of the company. And now I'll pass it over to Nichola, who will go into detail around all the different types of support that the government's providing during this period.
Thanks, Nick. So I'm going to the first of which is going to be the coronavirus business support. Now, the government have announced a variety of financial support mechanisms for businesses and employers since April 2020. So we're going to take a look at what they are today. Now, more support that the government offer is dependent on either the size of the employer or the industry that the employer is in. But there are some schemes such as the Coronavirus Job Retention Scheme, also known as the Furlough Scheme, or the deferral of VAT payments that are accessible to businesses of all sizes within all industry types. So each type of financial assistance is going to have its own eligibility criteria and its application process. So it's important for employers to understand what type of support they actually need. The types of support that the government are currently offering are loans with no interest or fees for the first 12 months, such as the bounce back loan. I know Nick mentioned in his slides, obviously loans are funds that will need to be repaid, which may not be a viable option for all businesses. So there are other means of financial support, such as the COVID-19 Future Fund, which is the government's agreement to match funding from investors. The Future Fund had an initial balance of 500 million that the government were aiming towards, and actually 450 million of that was claimed in its was applied for in the first day that that scheme went live. So that does seem to be one of the kind of most popular means of business support. But there are also other schemes, so such as the Business Interruption Loan Scheme, and that's available for any type of business, whether it's small, medium or large. And it's a bit more multifaceted than the other ones because it gives access not just to loans, but to other means of financial support, such as overdrafts and asset finance. Now, the other type of business support I just want to cover briefly is the new COVID-19 statutory sick pay reclaim scheme. You may already be aware of the scheme, but the HMRC have introduced a reclaim scheme that is going to allow employers to recover up to 2 weeks of statutory sick pay per employee for any absence related to COVID-19. So that's whether or not the employee has been absent due to having the virus or is indeed shielding. So next we're going to take a look at the Coronavirus Job Retention Scheme, because this is changing from the 1st of July up until its end date, which will have some cost implications for employers. So many of you will already be aware of what the Coronavirus Job Retention Scheme is, but the aim of the scheme was to allow employers to continue to retain their employees on their payroll with financial support from the HMRC, which means that employers could retain staff on the payroll, but also employees could retain their employment rights. Now, the scheme is changing from the 1st of July, so we're going to take a look at what those changes mean. So there are 4 main changes. The first of which is the scheme end date has been extended and the furlough scheme will remain in place until the 31st of October 2020. Now, in some of the other previous webinars that I've done, what a lot of the questions that have came up related to whether or not the scheme will be extended again, because obviously we've already seen quite a few extensions. I don't believe that the scheme will be extended past the 31st of October. There are certainly no kind of indications within the payroll world that it will be extended past this point. Now, the second change is that the HMRC will still contribute towards employee furlough pay, but there will become an increasing need for higher contributions from the employer. Change number 3 is the additional flexibility of the scheme. And one of the things that was a slightly more negative aspect of the furlough scheme prior to the 1st of July was the fact that it wasn't flexible. Employers are now going to have the ability to allow their employees to come back to work on a part-time work and part-time furlough basis. As well as this, the 3-week mandatory period of furlough leave is no longer going to be in place. So the employer will determine the length of furlough leave, and it can be of a period less than 3 weeks. And the final change is that there will be no new entrants into the furlough leave scheme. So if you have an employee who you're wanting to place on furlough, they will have to have completed 3 weeks of furlough as of the 30th of June in order to be put on any furlough leave again. That means you will have had to furlough your employees for the first time no later than the 10th of June. So I've mentioned that one of the main changes is going to be the contribution from the HMRC. Now, just before I give an overview of what the decreases from the HMRC are, I just want to call out that the employees who are on furlough leave will still be entitled to 80% of their wages, which employers will become responsible for contributing towards. So from the 1st of July, the HMRC will continue to pay 80% of employee wages, as well as the associated employer national insurance and pension costs. The employer, however, will be responsible for paying the employee for any hours that they actually work during the period of flexible furlough. You won't be able to reclaim this via the HMRC job retention scheme. From the 1st of August, the amount that the HMRC will contribute will stay the same at 80%. However, there will no longer be any ability for employers to claim any employer national insurance or employer pension on furlough pay. So an employer will now cover the cost of all national insurance and pension on furlough pay and any actual worked wages. Now, from the 1st of September, we start to see this decrease, and this is where the first mandatory furlough payment contribution will come in for employers. And employers will be expected to contribute 10% of the employee wages, while the HMRC contributes 70%. And from the 1st of October, employee wages will be covered up to a value of 60% from the HMRC, with employers having to contribute a minimum of 20%. So as with any legislation changes, there are always some benefits, but always some considerations that you need to make. So the 3 main benefits are the fact that the employer now has that flexibility to return staff for some of their contractual hours, whilst allowing employees still to remain furloughed. There is the continued financial support from the HMRC until the very end of the furlough scheme, even if it is at a reduced rate. And the minimum 3-week period has now been removed. And I have had experiences when speaking to customers who have actually found this minimum 3-week period quite restrictive, because they've been lucky enough to be in a position where they didn't necessarily have to furlough employees for 3 weeks, and it's been easier to return them after 2. Now, some of the considerations for the new legislation is that it will be an increase in employer costs. What I have done at the end of this, the slides in this presentation, is I've provided something in the appendices that will give a little bit of an illustration as to what the increase in costs will look like. So I'll be sure to share that with you after the session today. Another consideration is the calculation for furlough payments for flexible furlough are more complex than the initial furlough scheme calculations, and in all fairness, they were complex enough. So the calculations for flexible furlough now have the added complexity of being in hours, rather than calendar days. You know, we're lucky at PayFit that our software will automatically calculate flexible furlough for our customers. But if you do require an external source of support for these calculations, the HMRC have updated their furlough calculator to take into account flexible furlough, and they've also published some manual examples of how you can calculate the flexible furlough. And the final consideration is that it can't be used for new staff. So for those employees who you were planning to furlough, who have not been furloughed before, you will still continue to pay their wages because you won't be able to reclaim anything from the HMRC from them. Now, there are no major changes to the way that you will claim. It's still going to be done via the HMRC's online service, but I just want to cover two important dates. So the first is for any claims relating from the 1st of July onwards, you can only claim them from the 1st of July. That means you can't currently claim in advance for July. You could do this on the previous scheme, and it may be that that does change in future, but certainly for the first period of furlough on the flexible scheme, the 1st of July is the earliest you can claim. And the 31st of July is the latest date for claiming furlough payments for the period on or before the 30th of June. So if you haven't yet submitted your claim to the HMRC, please remember to do this from the 31st of July, by the 31st of July, because they will not accept any claims or reimburse any claims after this date, and then you'll then become liable for the cost. So we're just going to take a quick look at what happens at the end of furlough leave. Now, furlough leave will come to an end. This could be because the scheme is ending, as we know it is on the 31st of October, or it could be because the employee and employer had an earlier agreed end date for furlough leave. Either way, what happens at the end of furlough leave for a lot of employers is still unknown, but there are four main options. So the first is to extend any employee's furlough leave if their furlough was finishing before the 31st of October. Obviously, the ideal option is that all employees return to work full-time on their pre-furlough employment terms and conditions if it's financially viable for the employer to do so. The introduction of the flexible furlough scheme means that employees can return to work on reduced hours, but please remember this is a contractual change and a contractual agreement that the employee needs to be agreeing to as well before you implement any flexible furlough changes or any reduced hours changes. Now, the biggest issue facing employers at the end of furlough is potentially being in a position where they still aren't in a position financially that they can bring their employees back to work, and they may need to consider making some redundancy. So we're just going to spend the next 5 minutes looking at what that means for employers. Now, it is important to understand that even an employee who is on furlough still has the right to the correct redundancy process. Employers still need to follow the statutory legal redundancy process, even if the employee is on furlough. So this means that the employee is entitled to things like an appropriate length of consultation period, or to have companions or a colleague in a meeting with them. And it also means that they should be subject to a fair selection process, whether they volunteer for redundancy or if they're selected for compulsory redundancy. Now, when making any redundancies, there are also going to be the associated costs with making employee terminations. And I just want to call out that the majority of termination payments are not going to be covered by the furlough scheme. So making redundancies is a longer term saving, but it does come with a short term cost, and that amount is very employee specific. So it depends on the employee's salary, it depends on the employee's length of service. So employers making redundancies are going to have to consider the cost per employee of the likes of paying holiday pay and pay in lieu of notice, and this should be paid at a rate of 100%, even if the employee is on a period of furlough leave and are receiving less than that. Now, these two things as well, so any payment in lieu of notice or any holiday pay cannot be reclaimed via the furlough scheme. Then there's also the consideration of any statutory redundancy pay, and this is for employees with at least 2 years service. If your company as well has contractual redundancy arrangements in place, then you may be obliged to pay over and above the statutory minimum to make sure you're still being compliant with your contractual duties. Now, just to reiterate, the furlough scheme is not to be used for claiming termination payments. So employers will need to factor the cost of this in as being 100% their own cost to cover. Now, the final topic I want to cover is the other types of business support that are available to employers outside of the COVID-19 business support. So this is support that's available to employers all year round. So the first is being able to reclaim statutory payments. So all employers, irrespective of size or industry, can claim 90% of any statutory pay, excluding statutory sick pay from the HMRC. This includes any payments for maternity, paternity, adoption, bereavement, for example. And you'll do this every month by submitting your EPS or your employer payment summary to the HMRC through your payroll software. Now, if you are a smaller employer, you may be entitled to what we call small employers relief, which means that the amount of statutory pay you can reclaim actually increases to 103. So the amount that you actually reclaim is more than you would pay to your employee. And again, this is done by including these figures in your payroll software to be reported to the HMRC every month. The final type of support that is available is the employment allowance. So the employment allowance is £4,000 that you can use to offset against your employer Class 1 national insurance liability. And it's available to all employers whose employer national insurance for the last tax year was under £100,000. And it means that for the first £4,000 of your employer national insurance, you don't pay this. Or if you were a smaller employer again and your national insurance liability is less than £4,000 for the year, you won't actually pay any employer national insurance at all. Now, if you have seen this slide and think that you may have potentially missed a tax year that you could have claimed for, that's absolutely fine, because you can still claim for the previous 4 tax years if you haven't already done so through your payroll software. And you can do this by going onto the HMRC website and searching for employment allowance reclaims. Now that brings our presentation to an end. Just before we jump to our Q&A, I do want to mention that our blog and our LinkedIn page are kept up to date with all of the latest changes impacting employers, specifically around payroll and payroll costs. And we have a lot of resources and information for employers around furlough and redundancy. So it is worth checking that out if you do have any questions or you do just want to hear about the latest updates in payroll legislation. So now I think we move to any questions that you have submitted.
Thanks, guys. Much appreciated. Thank you both very much indeed. We've got a question there from Ben with regards to the chat box here that people can enter questions, and there's also the ask a question tab, which only I get to see. I have no idea why Crowdcast do this, but it's strange. So I'll read them out as well. But Ben asks about eligibility to receive R&D tax credits. So we do get asked that a lot on our webinar. So if either of you be able to explain that, because that's clearly a key component and is a massive plus for a lot of entrepreneurs out there.
I can just, I'm not an expert on the topic. Obviously, I applied for R&D tax credits when I was running my business, and I can give you my broad understanding. Essentially, any business where if you're building software or you're researching a particular project and you have people that are employed to specifically just work on research or development of any kind of technology, doesn't need to be software, can also be biotechnology, anything of the sort, then in theory you should be eligible. You need, as far as I remember, you need not to the technicalities is, I'm not exactly sure on the technicalities, so I'm not sure if you're making if you're a profitable business, you can claim them or not, actually. But yeah, as long as you can justify a specific project which is knowledge intensive, and requires research and building technology of any sort, you should be able to claim. But I don't know all the exact details to qualify.
Okay, thanks. Here's an interesting one. Can you fire somebody whilst on furlough?
I mean, short answer, yes. You can still terminate contracts on furlough, but the employer just needs to be mindful of why they're doing it. So if it's an issue relating to performance, or it's a genuine, kind of a misconduct type of situation, then yes, provided that the correct process is followed. If we mean relating to redundancies, you can make employees redundant during furlough. That's absolutely fine, because employees are at the stage now in their furlough periods where they'll understand whether or not it's viable to bring employees back. So as long as the correct legal processes are followed, there's no issue with bringing furlough leave to an end to terminate an employee's contract.
Yeah, I thought the way it was phrased piqued my interest. It was interesting. I just had a friend of mine just messaged me this morning saying he's been for an airline that everybody would know, been furloughed, then gone and done a bunch of commercial flights, just like flying PPE, China and back, and then now been furloughed again. And I didn't realize you kind of switch it on and switch it off again like that, but I'm assuming you can, and he's trying to wonder, why have I just done all these flights again, and now I'm been furloughed again? And I'm thinking, well, maybe they're stringing out the eligibility of each crew member to fly on a particular aircraft type. It can get quite technical, but I'm just trying to work out, because they've done all their redundancies last week, and he was one of the ones who got to stay. But yeah, so question for you would be, companies can clearly do that. They can switch that off and on again up to, well, at the moment, October, we're thinking, are we?
Yeah. So provided that, the employee is being furloughed for a genuine reason, in that there's no current requirement in the business for them to complete their role. The idea around furlough is to just give employees the flexibility to have the financial support without limiting them, and still allowing them to run a business, so you can bring employees back if there's a requirement for it. And that's why the 3-week minimum has been removed. Because we found, even with some of our customers, there wasn't a requirement for the employee to be out of business for 3 weeks. Therefore, there were actually employees were being out of business too long, and employers needed them to come back. Yeah.
And another question, I'm seeing one of these before as well, around training. Can my employees undertake training and do volunteer work, in inverted commas?
Yeah. So provided that they're not doing anything. So the wording the HMRC gives is that the employee cannot be generating any profit or revenue for the business. Okay. So they can be trained. Obviously, I think a lot of companies now will have to train their employees, because they're coming back into new ways of working. So there will be some elements of training. Provided the training is paid at minimum wage, there's no issue.
Okay, thanks. And going back to the R&D, David's put, hi Ben, best source via government website. Use this myself and backed up with accountants to ensure data supplied was compliant and in time. Libby says, we've continued to provide sick pay at full pay during this lockdown period. I read that it is possible to claim back SSP paid to employees due to COVID-19. Would this apply to my company at all?
So the main eligibility criteria for reclaiming statutory sick pay is that you have less than 250 employees on the 28th of February. Provided you meet that criteria and the absence is related to COVID-19, then yes, even a company who pays full pay, sick pay, can reclaim a proportion of that at the statutory rate from the HMRC.
Okay, thanks. Thanks, Libby. And another question on the Ask a Question tab here is, what happens to my employees' benefits during their furlough? And I guess that's going to change from company to company, but broadly speaking.
Yeah, broadly speaking, they remain in place. So there was nothing that the HMRC suggested to end benefits. One of the main things to note is that salary sacrifice is an employee benefit, but the HMRC have given some flexibility. Normally, you can't exit a salary sacrifice arrangement if you're an employee without a good reason, but furlough is now being classed as a true reason to leave a benefit. but there's an expectation that employers would still continue to provide the benefits that they had stipulated in the employment contracts.
Okay, got another one, popular subject clearly, and I know they've just extended the scheme as you've highlighted, so hence lots of questions on this. But and it's probably to do with the sunny weather as well, can an employee take annual leave whilst on furlough leave?
Yes, they can, and it's purely at the employer and employees and discretion to have a discussion about when leave is taken. And the only stipulation on annual leave is that it is paid at 100% of pay. So you can claim the 80% back from the HMRC, but the 20% will need to be funded by the employer.
Okay, and this question is probably from, sounds like it's from an employee. Can an employer require employees to use their annual leave during the current situation?
Yes, they can, but the employer will need to give double the length of notice to the annual leave period. So if your employer says to you, I want you to take 5 days annual leave, they'll need to give you 10 days notice.
Okay, so I didn't know that. Okay. So yeah, David's commented back to Ben's comment. Thank you, David, again. Andy Hardy. I'm planning to bring employees back gradually as business picks up. Is there a and I know a lot of friends who've said the same thing with regards to a multitude of different businesses. They're planning to bring their employees back gradually as they get more revenue in. Is there a protocol on who comes back first, i.e. length of service or seniority? Good question, Andy.
So there's not a protocol as such. We just need to remember that the idea of an employee being furloughed is because the alternative would have been either being laid off or being made redundant. So those employees that are coming back first should be the ones whose roles are being reinstated first. So those who don't necessarily have a role to come back to immediately can remain on furlough. But yeah, it should really be with whose roles are being reinstated first.
One leading off that as well, can an employer rotate which employees are furloughed?
I don't think so, simply because the idea behind putting someone on furlough is that their role is not there anymore. Yeah. And it shouldn't necessarily be a case of giving people, it sounds almost unfair because it almost feels like I'm then saying, no, you can't give employees the opportunity to return to work. But there's no guidance that says they can, there's no guidance that says they can't. I just know from a what we already know perspective, it should just be, the role is there or it is not.
Sounds creative, doesn't it? Sounds creative.
Yeah.
And what's David? Yes, they can rotate their staff on furlough.
Okay, interesting. I have to have a read about that.
Yeah. And how's it affected your business, guys? Have you had ridiculous number of inquiries coming through from current clients, or has it been steady as it always is?
I'll take it. Yeah, I mean, we've been a lot busier over the last few months. We also released the furlough feature in the app. So basically, employers can submit everything, see a report, have it all there on the payroll system. So we've had a lot of work in building it, but also updating it as the new information has been coming out. And clearly, it was a lot of our clients have been using it. It also tied in with the end of tax year. So, furlough was announced, I think, in March. And, obviously tax year ends in April. So it's been a busy period for us, absolutely, over the last few months.
Sorry, Nick, if they're able to enter the information on the app, how long will it take them to get that report then?
Maybe Nichola, you can provide a bit more information on it.
Yeah, so everything is in real time. So the employer puts in the data. The only thing that we ask is that you input the start date of the furlough and the end date of the furlough, and we generate the report instantly for them.
Okay, cool. Any other questions, guys, that we've got on here? Just coming up to the last 5 minutes or so. So any other questions you've got? Livy, I understand that government legislation will allow employees to carry forward their statutory annual leave entitlement into the next 2 leave years. What's the best way for an HR team to keep track of and monitor this?
So I think the best thing for monitoring statutory annual leave entitlement is always going to be have a system that can do it for you. I imagine from the end of the year there will be numerous HR and payroll softwares that update their features to take this new piece of legislation into account, because it's going to affect a lot of people. But yeah, it's a difficult one because it's unknown. Obviously, HR systems are the best way, and any other kind of records you can keep, even Excel spreadsheets, whilst they're not ideal, just anything that you can at least refer back to for the employers, for the employees' annual leave, I would say. So payroll softwares and HR softwares, I would like to think would adapt to what they already have to take that new piece of legislation into account.
Thanks, Nicola. Another question that's come down here. What's the maximum number of employees we can claim for? Back to furlough.
There isn't a maximum number. The HMRC never placed a number on how many could be claimed. Okay,
that should answer your question. Livy says, thank you, I'm allergic to admin. You and me both, Livy. That's great, thank you. Yeah, any last question? Otherwise, I can get Nick and Nicola to maybe finish with a couple of words just to round up and point you in the direction further inquiries and more information when it comes to finding out about PayFit. No, I haven't got any on the private channel. So yeah, if either of you'd like to wrap up, and what best place that people can get in contact with you, and I can post up the URL here in the chat box as well, because most people watch these on replay, so it'll be the last thing that they'll see as well. So I think that'll be helpful.
Yeah, absolutely. You can either contact me. It's nick.miller@payfit.com. I'll put my LinkedIn URL in the chat here just at the end. But that's the best way to contact me. But like Nicola said, we have a lot of content on our blog. If you have any more questions, there's a lot on there around the government support, different tools that you can use. We also have a furlough calculator and other resources to help you navigate the situation. You can request a demo on our website to learn more about PayFit and what we offer. We help with managing leaves for your employees, payroll, expenses, and a lot more. So yeah, I'll share my link here if anyone wants to contact me and add me on LinkedIn. Happy to help in any way I can.
Great, I've just posted up URL to the website and also Nick's email there as well. That's awesome. Thank you very much. David says, great presentation, guys. Lots of detail. Cheers, David, says Ben. Livy says, thank you. Brilliant. Thanks, everybody who interacted on this forum. Those of you watching on social as well. As I say, the replay will be available literally as soon as I press end broadcast now, both on here, YouTube, Facebook, and Twitter lives that we've just streamed as well. So thank you. Next webinar is going to be tomorrow at 10 a.m. here at Festival of Enterprise. Just brings me to thank Nick and Nicola from PayFit for joining us today and sharing that really detailed information. Absolutely. So I hope you're all taking notes. If not, I have posted up the website link there, and Nick's posted up his LinkedIn as well. Ben can hear the garden calling. Lucky you. Go for it. Thank you very much, guys. Nice to meet you both. We'll connect on LinkedIn as well, and enjoy the rest of your day.
Thanks a lot, everyone.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye now.
Bye.